Yes, ladies and gentlemen, your eyes and ears do not deceive you. The Low Star Legend series is back, although ideally I would have liked to have this uploaded on Friday because what the plan is going to be moving forward is that at least every Friday I'm going to put out a Low Star Legends video because as I've been streaming, people in the comments of those streams have been telling me, oh yeah, like go back to doing Low Star Legends. I really like that series, and if you're newer and you're just tuning in with this video, first and foremost, welcome to the channel. But second of all, Low Star Legends is where I go through the mud of FGO, if you will, and I cover the 3, 2, 1, and technically even the Angra Mainyu level of servants that are in this game because there are some genuine gems in there. Other gacha games like say Dokkan or Arknights might not have the best low rarity servants, or at least some of those low rarities in the case of something like Arknights might fall off in the mid to late game. That's not essentially true of FGO. Your low rarity servants do have a lower stat ceiling because they have lower level caps, but FGO is pretty unique in the fact that you can fix that if you like the servant enough, because you can always go through grailing those servants to make them a bit stronger if you like using them or you just think they're strong enough and they warrant said grails. And obviously the topic of today's video is going to be Hassan of the 100 Personas, but if you are a fan of the Low Star Legends series, like I mentioned at the very beginning, I am going to try to drop one of these every single Friday, and that might be the daily upload for Friday, or if there's something worth talking about, say a new servant releases or we get a round of buffs, maybe I do some summons, it'll be the second upload of that day. As you guys have seen over the past like week or two, I'm not opposed to doing double daily uploads. As long as there's enough that I'm able to kind of get out there, I will keep yapping and talking about it because I absolutely love this game. I only shaped my entire YouTube channel around it. I gotta like it a little bit, but just for, you know, old heads on the channel, that's gonna be the general plan moving forward. We'll see how well that kind of sticks out because people know how I am with schedules. I'm kind of all over the place. That being said, if you are a new viewer of the channel, I would appreciate a like and maybe even a subscription to the channel, as it is absolutely free and it helps me out more than you know, and you'll only be getting the hottest and freshest takes in the entire FGO community. With that being said, let's start diving into 100 Persona's kit, starting off with her hits. And what you'll notice right off rip is that her hits are not actually very good, and that is because she is a very old servant. And this is not just because she's a low rarity. A lot of even the 5 stars during like years 1 and 2 did not have the greatest hits. I think DW, the company that was running the game at the time, didn't really have a general good idea of like how long they wanted to run the game and how long maybe the metas would be going and how they wanted to build servants, what was going to be like good and bad in the game. And so a lot of servants just kind of have these mediocre hits that you really don't see on modern servants. Thankfully, 100 Personas does have some pretty simple yet very effective skills that help her offset these hits, and at least they're not as bad as some of the other servants that might have one hit on their arts card, because as an art servant, you really do want to be refunding your NP as often as possible, especially with the NP upgrade that she has. The other thing you might notice over there is the NP charge on her attack. You'll notice that it's 0.48, but then you'll notice on NP it is lowered to 38%. That is because her NP has an obscenely high amount of hits, and usually when an art servant has an obscenely high amount of hits on their NP, they usually do something like this to lessen how much they're actually refunding. They also did this to say somebody like Caskill around this time as well, so for those that are curious, that's basically all that is. But there is something major of note over here, and that is that 6-hit extra attack. Now, longtime viewers of the channel will know that the extra attack is a composite card that gen stars NP and does big boy damage. And only the most loyal members of the channel will know that going for the extra attack append skill is the only way to turn it from the extra attack to the omnipotent attack. And she is rocking 6. Now usually we like to see 5 on the extra attack. That's the gold standard. Going to 6, that is going above and beyond. So make sure you are hitting those brave chains with Hassan of the 100 Personas, and you can actually afford to not only go for the battery append skill, but also the extra attack one, because she's a free-to-play servant, and you'll just be accumulating her coins as you summon on just various banners and you pull numerous copies of her. With all that being said about the hits, let's start diving into her skills, starting off with her first skill. And again, like I said, these are very, very simple skills. You gotta remember she's quite the old servant, so she's not packing like 95 million different effects like, say, someone like Kazura Drop is doing, where she's also bringing in like new mechanics and whatnot. She's going to be bringing herself 20% NP generation rate, or NP gain, for 3 turns, and then also buffing her own quick start generation rate by 40% for 3 turns on a 5-turn cooldown. That is also kind of nice because she does have a passive Presence Concealment A that is giving her 10% critical star generation, so technically she actually has 50% star gen. So not only is her star gen going to be pretty good on her quick cards, you actually have the possibility of genning some stars on her arts card as well. especially if, say, you're going to be doing a Brave Chain where you're going to be, say, leading with like a quick card or something, where you're also going to be buffing your crit gen rate by an additional 20%, or just straight up doing a Mighty Chain, that also works. She'll be able to provide for herself a fair amount of stars, and that NP gain does kind of offset a little bit the lower NP gain value and the lower hits that she does have. Another thing to really pay attention to over here on her skills is that they are on a very low cooldown of 5, because even when we move over to her next skill, this is also on a 5-turn cooldown, and this is one of the issues I do have with 100 Personas. It's not the largest one, it might make her a little bit annoying to use, but it's a chance based on singular different procs of 80% to give her a 30% quick, arts, and buster buff for 3 turns, and a guaranteed evasion for 1 turn. So at the very least, her survivability is guaranteed. If you see an enemy NP coming your way, or you're just very low on HP and you need to survive that extra turn, you're guaranteed to at least get that, as long as the enemy doesn't have like sure hit, ignore invincibility, or buff removal. But realistically, most servants are kind of screwed if you do have buff removal on the enemy. It's just the fact that the most important one to get here is the arts buff. You can kind of think of this like the Space Ishtar problem, where Space Ishtar can almost feel like a different servant whether you're using her as a quick, arts, or buster looper, and whether or not she does actually get that card buff, because that card buff does help her out a lot. And the same thing is true of 100 Personas, again, in particular, that arts buff, because that arts buff is not only going to be giving her more damage, and her base damage can already be very, very low if you're not getting this, but again, it's also further reinforcing the NP gain of those arts cards. You can almost think of the first and second skill joining together to reinforce how much NP she's going to be able to refund. So you can always pair her with, say, somebody like an Ozymandias if you do have him lying around your Chaldea. Characters that can increase your buff success rate, I mean, those are always really good. I believe there's a couple of CEs that also do buff your buff success rate, but none of them are particularly good for the most part. But I guess if you're really hurting and really want to get that buff guaranteed, you could do something along those lines. I'm hoping in the future that if they do decide to go ahead and buff her, that they will fix this over here, because I don't think she'd be too broken if you could just guarantee that she's going to be getting those 30% buffs, and maybe have it be that she's guaranteed the 30s, but then an additional 20% might proc on 80%. I think that could be a very nice buff to push her way. And then finally, the third skill over here is why you're going to see a couple of solos that we did with Hasana the 100 Personas over here. She has a massive 4k heal on a 6-turn cooldown. Now, the main gimmick to this is while you do get that big heal, it does remove all of your buffs. So you do want to time this when you don't have your buffs up. I know there might be some awkward times where you need the extra HP to live the next turn, but you're going to remove all of, like, say, your card buffs, and you're like, oh man, I just worked really hard to get that arts buff and now I gotta remove it. It does suck a little bit, but again, living to actually beat the fight is better than not beating it at all. And having a 4k heal does, again, let her get through some of these fights. And the more that you use her and the more comfortable you get with playing FGO, the better you'll be able to position yourself to not have to lose your buffs. Like, you can kind of plan out the next couple of turns being like, okay, I'll take about this much damage this turn. The second skill will give me a dodge, so I get a free turn as well. And then the buffs will fall off, and then I'll pop this, get the heal, and then I'll be back in for another turn. It's just one of those things that every player eventually gets better at. So if you're frustrated with it initially, like me when I first started playing the game, I just kind of never used the third skill. I just used the first and second one. But as you get better, and especially if you're going to be going into doing some solo quests and whatnot, you'll get better at being able to use this heal. It's a very powerful thing that she does have in her arsenal. Unfortunately, on a 6-turn cooldown, I think maybe they could have just slapped a 4-turn cooldown on this, because it has a massive demerit on it. So why not let it be a little bit of a gimmick? 4k heal, 4-turn cooldown, maybe that could have been something, but I guess they were cowards during the first couple of years during the game. Now we go over to her NP, and this has seen a massive glow up, because not only did they give it higher damage scaling by buffing the NP, the percentage actually went up, but it has 2 really good effects, namely one that a lot of people are going to care about, and that is reducing the enemy's arts resistance by 20% for 3 turns, meaning each subsequent NP that you're going to be doing is going to be doing more damage, because you're further reducing their defenses by 20%. That's why if you look at something like a damage chart, you're not actually seeing how much damage he's going to be able to do, because she is one of those servants that benefits for the fight going on for a couple of extra turns. Sure, she wouldn't be great in farming or anything, but she doesn't have a battery or anything. I don't know why you would try to be using her in farming for like some single target wave, but stop doing that. Use her for boss fights, CQs, advanced quests, anything along those lines. The other thing that I think kind of goes unsung on her is that at base, she has a 50% reduction in the enemy's attempt to do critical attacks for 3 turns, and that is also going to stack on them, so you can kind of guarantee that you're going into, say, fighting a Rider who you already resist is not going to be critting you, which means that heal is even more valuable, because the one thing that could throw off and offset the power of a 4k heal on, a unit that doesn't have the most HP is getting slammed by a crit. But if you can prevent them from doing that, it kind of artificially makes you a little tankier. And again, reducing critical attack chance never usually gets noticed, but when you do have it on the scale of going from 50 to 100%, where you could pretty much just shut it down completely, I do think that is something that is worth noting on this servant. And overall, again, I'm going to show up the damage numbers over here because I know that's going to be something that gets brought up. The first one you're seeing kind of shows her at the bottom of the list. You're thinking that she's not going to be doing a lot of damage, but again, you got to remember that she is a free NP5. You will eventually get this servant to NP5 if you're rolling on normal banners, rolling on the friend point gacha, which you should be doing for those event CEs. And so realistically, her numbers are higher, but also I'm showing the numbers when she does get that arts up, because there are ways that you can kind of artificially inflate the numbers on that 80% chance. Again, somebody like Ozymandias is an example of a buff success rate boosting servant. And then when you actually look at those numbers, you realize, okay, it's not like she becomes a juggernaut of damage, but her base does start off a lot better. She's going to be around that range of, say, like Emiya Assassin to kind of Wu Zacian, who again at NP1 don't do the most damage, but remember, she's a free version of like one of those servants. You can get that same level of damage for absolutely no cost. You'll also be able to do all of her append skills and fully take advantage of those. And remember that she will start to do more damage than them after she fires her first and second NP. Once she starts stacking that arts down, she will start to outdamage them. You can think of her as kind of stacking and gaining more damage as the fight goes on. I guess also something that should be mentioned, because she is a free-to-play servant and you can get all of her append skills, her append skill for damage is against archers, so technically she does have a niche not only against riders, being able to go take them out as an assassin, but technically you could also bring her against archers if you think it's a favorable matchup, or you just don't have a great lancer at your disposal at the moment. Or maybe, again, you just like using 100 personas and you want to bring her to those fights. By all means, knock yourself out with that. Also, with the advent of the 4th and 5th append skill, she will get a tad bit better, because she will get a passive 30% critical damage boost, which is one of the things that she is lacking. She doesn't have a huge crit damage boost to take advantage of all those stars she's going to be generating. But again, I think one solid buff could definitely help her out. If they just toss her something like a buff success rate of 20%, anything from a 20%, because again, she's already getting a base 30% from the append 4 critical damage buff, or even, hey, they want to toss her a base 50%, that's also fine. I think she's going to be absolutely fine as a free-to-play servant. I think a lot of players, are going to tell me, oh, well, that's not enough. She needs way more than that. But remember, these are free-to-play options. Some of them are some of the more broken servants in the game, but they don't all have to be. If they're just good, solid options, like, say, somebody like Uriel or Ushiwakamaru, then that's okay. I just want the free-to-play players to have good characters available to them. That way it's not as frustrating as some of these other games where the low rarity servants that they're being given aren't very good. FGO does have some very strong free-to-plays, and I'd like to see that floor get raised a little bit higher so they can have an easier time taking on some other content. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. Are there any Hassan of the 100 Personas simps out there? Let me know, sound off in the comments down below. Pay attention to that community tab, because I do throw out 4 low star legends into a poll and we slowly start knocking them out. Leonidas was really close to winning the next one, so throwing him up there again, I'm pretty sure he's going to win. And then I'm secretly crossing my fingers for the boy Spartacus, because Spartacus is one of my favorite servants to use in this game. I think he's hilarious, so we'll see who wins for next week. But with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice one, and I'll catch y'all on the flippity floppity.